Hello and welcome back. Here we are at the end of the first week. In this video, I would like to summarize everything that we have covered this week and also give you a little bit of a bird's eye picture of what's coming up next week. As I mentioned in one of the early videos, this course will not have the desired effect on your happiness unless you're diligent and you've completed all the videos and the exercises for this course, and you're also open-minded. That is, you're willing to be open to new ideas and perspectives. So I hope that you have viewed all 11 video lectures thus far, that you've completed all the quizzes embedded in these videos, and that you have started the first exercise, defining and incorporating happiness. If you haven't viewed all previous videos and completed all the embedded quizzes, or you haven't started the first exercise, please pause the video right now and do these things first before we move forward. In fact, I'm going to pause it for you right here. Click on the proceed button only if you have completed viewing all the videos and done all the quizzes and started the first exercise. In an earlier video, I introduced to you the metaphor of the balloon, where the size of the balloon represents how happy you are, and the holes in the balloon represents the happiness sins, which deflate the balloon. One way to become happier is to patch the holes on the balloon, that is, get rid of the sins. Another way is to inflate the balloon, which is where the 7 habits of the highly happy come in. The first deadly happiness sin, which we discussed this week, is devaluing happiness. How do we devalue happiness? Well, by succumbing to the fundamental happiness paradox. As we saw, we routinely sacrifice happiness for the sake of other goals. Now, why do we devalue happiness, given that it's so important to us? For 3 reasons. First, harboring negative beliefs about happiness. Second, not defining happiness in concrete terms. And third, medium maximization. The way to overcome the first deadly happiness sin is by acquiring and reinforcing the first habit, which is to prioritize but not pursue happiness. As we saw from the studies that Kelly, David, Lauren, and I have run, while it's important to remind ourselves to make happiness-enhancing decisions, it is equally important not to chase happiness. When we chase happiness by comparing how we feel with how we would ideally like to feel, we end up being less happy. The question is, how do you acquire and reinforce the first habit of prioritizing but not pursuing happiness? It is through the first exercise, which is defining and incorporating happiness. The exercise has 2 components, of course, as the name suggests. As I mentioned, it is better not to equate happiness to sensory pleasure or pride. Not because there's anything morally wrong with these emotions, but because they are not sustainable. For the same reason, it is better to equate happiness to something more like abundance. Since findings show, for example, this paper by Dambrun and Ricard and others, that it is this type of happiness that has the best potential to be sustained for long durations. The second component of the exercise has to do with identifying the things, the people or objects or activities that help you experience happiness in the way that you've defined it. Hopefully, as a result of this exercise, you have a good idea of what happiness means to you and what kinds of things lead you to feel happy in the way that you've defined it. Now, let me talk a little bit about how defining and incorporating happiness is likely to plug the happiness hole created by the first deadly happiness sin, which is devaluing happiness. Remember that one of the reasons why we devalue happiness is because we don't have a concrete, readily available definition of it. We address this problem by coming up with a personally relevant and concrete definition of happiness, which is the first component of the exercise, of course, defining happiness. Remember also that the reason why we sacrifice happiness for the sake of other goals is because of medium maximization. As we saw earlier, we are distracted by things that lead to happiness, which makes us forget all about happiness. So, reminding ourselves on a regular basis to prioritize happiness, we are reminding ourselves to refocus on what we ultimately want in life, which is not the mediums that lead to happiness, but happiness itself. So, in other words, in a sense, we want to go back to being like a child. If you pay close attention to kids, you will notice how impressively undistracted from happiness they are. I had the privilege of recognizing this when my son was about 4 years old. He saw another kid in the neighborhood driving one of these motorized cars and he desperately wanted one for himself. So we ordered the car for him from Amazon. Car soon arrived in a box and my son was totally into the car for all of 3 days. After that, he started playing more with the box in which the car came than with the car itself. Why? Because he was infatuated with this cartoon character called Hamilton the pig, who apparently used to live in a box, and so he wanted to do the same thing. I remember being quite upset about this, but then I realized, how does it matter to me how my son has fun so long as he's having fun? I also realized that it's precisely because we are told by others and by society on what to value, money or value for money, status, beauty, power, etc., that we lose sight of what makes us happy, which should actually be quite instinctive. So not only did I let my son continue to play with this cardboard box to his heart's content, I actually told myself that I should try and do the same thing. That is, not get distracted from happiness when I'm making my decisions. This brings me to the third and final reason why we devalue happiness, because of the negative beliefs we harbor about happiness. That happiness makes one lazy or selfish, or that it's fleeting. Hopefully, by defining happiness as authentic pride, or as love/connection, or as abundance, you will realize that this is not true. While sensory pleasure and hubristic pride may be fleeting, authentic pride, love, and abundance, certainly abundance, aren't. In one sense, the attempt in the remaining weeks of this course is going to be to help you to experience the feeling of abundance on a more regular basis. As I will mention towards the end of this course, getting rid of the 7 deadly sins and acquiring the 7 habits of the highly happy will make it more likely that you experience this feeling of abundance on a more regular basis. And that, I think, is a beautiful thing. With that, let me bid you goodbye for now. See you bright and early next week when I will be discussing the second deadly happiness sin, which is chasing superiority, the second habit of the highly happy, pursuing flow, and the second exercise, which is practicing gratitude.